And today is Thursday, April 24th, 2025. Let me go ahead and pin Anna to the front here. Hey, Anna, welcome.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's mostly evening throughout the United States now. I have been inundated with calls this week from people that are just now understanding all of the different kinds of United Stateses there are. So when I say everybody in the United States this evening, I'm obviously talking about the United States, upper lowercase, right? And so we're talking about the country as opposed to corporations called the United States, right?
Right.
It's very, very tiring. And just to give you some insight into the depth of the problem, I just got this on my messages here this afternoon. We now know why on the 9th of December in 1945, the International Organization Immunities Act relinquished every public office of the United States to the United Nations. Did everybody hear that?
Yeah, that was on December 9th, 1945.
Yes, on December 9th in 1945, the International Organization Immunities Act relinquished every public office of the United States to the United Nations.
Happened at the Nuremberg trials.
Oh, sorry, we've got a hot mic.
But it's the United States with a small th, right?
Yeah, so not our United States. That would be the corporate United States. And essentially, what I'm hearing you say is that this particular act ended up making it so that all of the otherwise corporate offices that we know of in the United States would now be under the auspices of the UN.
Right.
Yeah, which is really global governance, right? The United Nations is
Well, the municipal government had been moving in that direction for years. And remember, the Pope had a 60% interest in the United States corporation. So he could pretty much do whatever he wanted to do simply by having the majority interest. So obviously what happened is that the Roman Curia and the Pope decided to transfer the offices to the United Nations instead of the United States Corporation as a separate entity. See, they basically enfranchised it to the UN. In 8 U.S.C. 1481, it is stated that once an oath of office is taken, citizenship is relinquished. Thus, any state employee becomes a foreign entity, agency, or state.
that's a brain twister. Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that we, back when we were indoctrinated, we would see people get elected into these government positions or appointed into government positions, and then they would put their hand on a Bible and they would raise up their hand and they would take this oath of office, which is all pretense, because what you're saying under 8 U.S.C. 1481 is that if they did that, then they were essentially putting themselves they were being removed from their U.S. citizenship and then now being put into this, is that in the UN?
UN status.
Wow. Did you guys get that, everybody? That's huge. So every public figure that has an oath on the record essentially works for the UN.
Okay, and so would you like to continue on with this little lesson? Okay, JAM, spelled like grape jam. JAM versus International Finance Corporation, IFC. In 2019, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the International Organizations Immunity Act did not grant international organizations absolute immunity. Rather, it ruled that, like foreign governments, international organizations could be sued under federal law for their commercial activities. This was a rejection of long-standing jurisprudence which held that international organizations shared the same expansive sovereign immunity enjoyed by foreign governments in 1945 when the IOIA was first enacted, even though Congress had placed restrictions on foreign governments' sovereign immunity in subsequent legislation, including the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. 22 U.S.C. 288. Persons employed by a foreign government or international organization. Standing is legally defined as the position of a person in reference to his capacity to act in a particular instance. The 9 lawyers commonly referred to as the United States Supreme Court have written, in essence, the question of standing is whether the litigant is entitled to have the court decide the merits of the dispute or of a particular issue. Warth, W-A-R-T-H versus Selden, 422 U.S. 490, 498, 1975. If a plaintiff lacks standing, then all courts are legally and constitutionally incapable of proceeding because courts only adjudicate justiciable controversies. United States versus Interstate Commerce Commission, 337 U.S. 426, 430. Notice the litigants in the last case, if you're thinking government is somehow exempt from standing requirements. People under the influence of a statist mind control automatically start trying to find loopholes and exemptions for their authority figures, the government. This psychological response is not unlike the Stockholm Syndrome. And make no mistake, this is considered a very important issue by the Supreme Court and government attorneys, especially when they are the defendants, as proven by the recent case when the Bush administration lost in regards to NSA spying programs. Standing is usually a bureaucrat's first line of defense. Pay attention to what the Supreme Court wrote about the elements of standing. The requirement of standing, however, has a core component directly derived from the Constitution. Standing is also very widely considered and has always been very widely considered in the law, because if you don't have standing with regard to an issue, you don't have a dog in the fight. Therefore, you have nothing to say about it. Okay? A plaintiff must allege personal injury fairly traceable to the defendant's allegedly unlawful conduct and likely to be redressed by the requested relief. Okay? Allen, A-L-L-E-N, versus Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, 468 U.S. 737, 751, 1984. So, they must allege a personal injury that's connected to the defendant's unlawful conduct, and it's likely to be redressed by the requested relief. Okay, so these are all elements to consider. Can the court give relief? And this is where you hear all the cases where they say that relief cannot be granted. The court doesn't have it within its authority or its power to grant relief. Okay, so whatever it is that you're seeking as redress has to be within the court's ability to deliver. And this, of course, references Article 3, Section 2 of the, quote, United States, quote unquote, Constitution, which requires the plaintiff to present a case before a court may proceed. The judicial power shall extend to all cases. It does not extend to public opinion, for example. The case or controversy doctrines state fundamental limits on federal judicial power in our system of government. The Article 3 doctrine that requires a litigant to have standing to invoke the power of a federal court is perhaps the most important of these doctrines. More explicitly, standing requires violation of a legally, governmentally recognized right. The Declaration of Independence proves this, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Okay, and so from the Arizona Constitution, governments are established to protect and maintain individual rights. Article 2, Section 2. This means everything governments do must be to protect and maintain individual rights, which is basically what I've said to you all along, that the only job of a government is to protect the people and their property. Okay. The quote unquote Supreme Court has held consistent with this principle. Quote, the duties of this court, as of every judicial tribunal, is limited to determining rights of persons or of property which are actually controverted. Tyler versus Judges of the Court of Registration, 179 U.S. 405. While standing consists of two absolutely essential elements. First, violation of a legal right, and two, personal injury. Now I'll apply this standard to cases brought by pretended state and United States attorneys. First, we'll look at a traffic case, such as a failure to wear a seatbelt. Traffic cases represent a significant source of energy stolen from people every year. I get a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. The case is called State of Arizona versus Mark Stevens, who is providing this narrative. One of two requirements for standing is a plaintiff must allege personal injury. Has the state of Arizona, a fiction, alleged that I have caused a personal injury by not wearing a seatbelt? Of course not. That's one essential missing element. I've already established the pretended plaintiff is not entitled to have the court decide the merits of the dispute or any dispute of this particular issue. In Worth versus Selden, 422 U.S. 490, 470, 498, 1975, allegations or not, there's no injury to anyone if I don't wear a seatbelt. Okay? So this is standing under their law. And he's done a good job of explaining what standing is under international law of the sea and how they look at this, right? But I brought up a different standing in talking about Mr. Trump not being able to establish standing because he's not present in our jurisdiction. If you're not in someone's jurisdiction, then you cannot claim to have standing in a case in that jurisdiction, right? So if you're out at sea on a boat in the middle of the ocean, acting as the captain of a vessel under a foreign flag, you obviously can't come in and say that you have anything to do with what's going on over here on the land and on the soil of a country, right? So that's a different kind of standing, and it's a standing that has to do with the jurisdiction you're in. If you don't have the correct jurisdiction, then you really can't act upon it. You can't be two places at once, so to speak. So that's the other kind of standing where you have to have it isn't based on having a complaint. It isn't based on having an injury. In our case, in the case of the land and soil, it primarily has to do with being present on the land and soil. If you're working as a foreign officer, you're in the employ of a foreign corporation, and you've accepted a citizenship obligation that is foreign, then you have nothing to say about what goes on in America on the land and soil of the states of the Union. It seems pretty straightforward and obvious to me. I don't know why it was so very difficult for the Trump administration to come to terms with, but it's in terms of the ecclesiastical law, it's a breakdown to the old no man can serve two masters.
It's actually quite simple. It's so simple that it's complicated. We're used to being in this world where everything is up is down and down is up, and it's, word salad all the time.
Cool.
But this is plain English, and it actually sets a really clear bar, for lack of it sets a clear bar that there's a distinction between where we stand and where they stand. And based on that case from 1945, none of the courts have standing as it relates to us anyway. I mean, this is something you've told us before, but the point is here's just another reference and defining this standing, violating of the personal rights and being clear that there's a verifiable personal injury. I mean, those are key. All of these statutes and codes are right out the window.
Well, and it automatically means that all of these quote unquote crimes that don't have a victimless crimes, those are mere administrative rules and infractions that only apply to actual government employees. Does not apply to us.
That's it.
Okay, so their definition of standing, you have to prove that you have a right, and number two, that you've been injured. Okay. Our version of standing, you have to prove that you have a dog in the fight and that you're in the correct jurisdiction. And if you're not, well, then you can't bring forward pleadings in that jurisdiction. So it's a slightly different issue, you see. It's very interesting, the International Organizations Immunity Act. They were basically in the process of selling us to the Pope as slaves. And this, you know how I've talked about how a bad idea can be transferred from generation to generation? Well, this is a bad meme, and it is called benevolent enslavement. And it's basically one of those excuses that the Catholic Church used when it came in and tried to, by force, make indigenous peoples give up their native culture and religious belief and language and traditional dress and everything else. They were enslaving these people, and they admitted that they were enslaving these people. And they were forcing them to do all sorts of things in the name of benevolent enslavement. Because if you were enslaved by the church and became a bond slave of Christ, then you had Christ and you couldn't possibly ask for anything more. And this was the entire excuse that was given. So, and it's just a bad idea. That's basically an evil idea that was adopted as a doctrine. And as a result, the church was involved in all of these vicious activities that were meant to destroy the indigenous cultures and to force systems of belief and religion on people. And so we'll just dispense with that by saying that it makes as much sense as killing for Christ. That's another one of these completely objectionable and bizarre sorts of ideas that got started along the way, whereby people have been induced to do all sorts of terrible things in the name of some sort of presumed good in the end. Okay. And they have also pretended to have standing. Now, the United States Corporation really has nothing to do with the people who are here living in the United States, the country, right? I mean, that's like supposing that a store called Greater Waldo has something to do with the country named Greater Waldo. And we all know that, a private business or even a public corporation, which simply has a similar name, does not have the attributes, nature, and jurisdiction of an entire country. right?
Right.
And so this is just more denouement. This is just more, hey, did you know that all of the corporate offices, the corporation, the United States had public offices. And did you know that those public offices have been given away to the United Nations? And the United Nations was granted immunity from being sued. It was granted freedom from liability from anything their officers might do. Because
Total.
that's how it started out.
And it would be that way to all of their participating member nations, right? The ones that participate and fund UN.
Yes, and this is also why the National quote unquote Security Council is made up of a whole bunch of foreigners. Have you ever looked at who is on the National Security Council? It's people from all over the world, not hardly an American among them. And they're the ones that are supposed to be looking out for our national security. So this has been crazier than a bed bug's worst fantasy since 1945. And the United States corporation was stolen to begin with. We're basically talking about the Federal Republic here. The Federal Republic was operated as the United States corporation by the original Confederation of States. So in 1871, when the Rump Congress declared itself to be the inheritor and owner and possessor of all of the assets, corporate attributes and franchises of the United States, it was talking about the United States Corporation. It was talking about the Federal Republic, which had been seized upon, restructured, brought into all the assets transferred to a different kind of entity, a corporation that was owned and operated on a 60-40 basis, with the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire getting 60% of the spoils, and the British territorial government getting 40% of the spoils, and us, the actual owners and operators, being kept in the dark and not told a thing and deliberately defrauded. Okay, so that happened in 1871. And if you follow forward some years, you see that there was a whole series of really, I have to take this call, just a second.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Until Anna gets back. Go ahead, Anna.
Well, and so then you can see the Holy Roman Empire, the Roman Pontiff, whatnot, had a 60% interest in the United States Corporation. And after the Second World War, they weaseled things around to give the United Nations control. And they've been driving toward this operation of the United Nations ever since. And so they were given all of the public offices that were thought to be associated with the United States Corporation, and they were given control of the National Security Council, and that's why there are so many foreigners on the National Security Council. And in 1980, President Jimmy Carter transferred all the American birth certificates over to the IMF for the benefit of the United Nations to operate as our trustees. All the municipal citizens of the United States were then under the control of the United Nations and under municipal law. And of course, most of us had been illegally registered first as British territorial U.S. capital C citizens, and then subsequently impersonated by Holy Roman Empire estate trusts, sestate trusts. And those were what were actually being transferred, those birth certificates, for redefining and impersonating us as municipal public trusts. That's what this is all talking about. Of course, this is all crazier than bed bugs to us. I mean, we're sitting here, we're Americans, damn it. We have no reason to think that we were ever territorial persons or any reason to think that we were municipal persons. And this, these two groups of employees, foreign federal subcontractors, got in here and ginned all this crap up about us, told the rest of the world all these lies, lied to us, kept us totally uninformed. This was all done in secret. And none of it could actually apply to us, except if we volunteered or we acquiesced. Okay. And this is why I made such a rampage this past Monday when I found out about what they were trying to pull this weekend. Now, we've already established that, no, we totally reject any offer and any thought that we are British territorials and much less Holy Roman Empire municipal trusts. And they were trying to do the same kind of thing. They were trying to confer world citizenship on everyone worldwide. And that would have conferred all sorts of obligations that would have been set up by the quote unquote United Nations. And you see the reason why we have to just poke anything like that, pop their bubble immediately and get rid of them.
So then, Anna, does that mean that the US trustees, which at some point we were putting the US trustees on notice when we corrected our status, does that mean that those US trustees are UN employees? And do you think that they know that they work for the UN?
You've got two trusts, and so you've got two sets of trustees. You've got municipal trustees, you've got territorial trustees, and they both call themselves United States trustees, and leave it to you to figure out which United States they're talking about. Is it this United States, that United States, or another United States? You see, it's a semantic shell game, and they set it up that way to make it confusing and make it hard for people to figure out what was going on and who was saying what about who and what kinds of things were going on. I mean, if you had to sit here alone and figure this out by yourself, you'd be here until at least, another 30 years, right? But thank God you don't have to go through all that research and figure all this stuff out on your own, because other people already did it and passed on the information so that I'm sitting here tonight to tell you.
Now, was this research from your new collection that you got on I don't remember the title, but you shared about it, the set of books that you got that are now available to us on Amazon, or is this string of research that you've
No, this was Mark Stevens. And
okay.
and he's another researcher. Mark Emery is another one. Once you know what you're dealing with, it's easy to respond appropriately. But they leave you in such ignorance, and they fail to disclose things so that you are left to take a guess. What am I dealing with here? Is this a municipal magistrate court? Are we talking about a municipal public trust named after me? Am I talking to an actual trustee?
Yeah,
And they shouldn't be here at all.
right. And you're not required to know their foreign language.
Correct. They should not be here operating in this country at all. We're supposed to maintain their government within the city of Washington, D.C. They were never supposed to operate outside the District of Columbia ever at all. And yet you see what they've created. And it's all been on a basis of fraud and, commercial assumptions. Just willful, self-interested, power-mongering greed. And they came damn near close to getting away with it. They were all poised, ready to go.
Well, these are
And it's-
incredible resources. There are always a number of people, peppered throughout the country that are having difficulties in de facto courts and with false presumptions and assumptions and, hearsay and presentments of injury when there is no injury, like you were saying, victimless crimes. And so I think that these resources that you've given tonight are going to be very helpful for people that are having challenges like that.
Well, at least they can summarily prove that the plaintiff lacks standing. I'm hoping that all these courts are going to get cleaned out and be out of here. Because they have no right to be here. These municipal courts, these municipal trusts, none of it should be here. They kind of carried along like fleas on a dog and rode on the backs of the territorial government, which allowed them to do that because, of course, they're getting a 40% split. And that's the dirty part of it they don't want to admit. That the British territorial government, which is hired to protect us, allowed this. It's outrageous. It's just offensive. Anybody who realizes what's gone on here is slack-jawed with amazement and disgust. But people all over the world have to realize what happened here so that they can better understand what is happening or what they're trying to do. They're trying to squirrel around and create a rigged citizenship obligation and apply it to everybody on Earth, just like they conferred 14th Amendment citizenship obligations on the freed Black plantation slaves by simply assuming that they were stateless. But we're not stateless, and neither were they. That was a false presumption. It was a false and secret presumption, by the way. Just like they were trying to pull this weekend, trying to say that we were all stateless because we were franchises of bankrupted corporations, when we were not franchises of any bankrupted corporations, when we do not stand good for those bankrupted corporations, when we are the victims of personage and other venal crimes. So, a lot of this stuff that they're trying to pull out, they have obviously been thinking about for a long, long time. And now, even when they're found out and are facing the noose, they think that they're going to get away with it and that they might as well, continue on with the plan, even though the plan has failed, even though we know what their plan is, even though we recognize it for what it is. And even though we're organized and have all of our states in session, so that the ridiculousness of thinking that we're stateless is very obvious.
Right, because they presume residency. And if we're not, quote, residents of a state that we're somehow stateless, when in reality, we're native of our nation state, right? So
right.
Our nationality is what we stand on, not
right.
residency. Yeah.
Right. We don't need residency. We don't need any permission to be here because we are the people and the government. And this is our land and our soil. They're the ones that are here at our behest. They're the ones that are here that are supposed to be serving us with good faith essential government services. They're the ones who are here on a temporary basis. Okay. Read the Residence Act. We allowed them to stay here and provide services.
Well,
and to take over.
An interesting question came up this week in regards to, I was explaining to somebody that people who earn federal income or state income by being a federal employee or a state employee, they're the ones that have to pay taxes. And then the question came up, well, what would incentivize them to become government workers if they knew that they were the only ones that ever had to pay taxes? And I thought that was a pretty good question.
They wouldn't.
Yeah, no one would want to work for the government, right? There'd be no more gravy trains, so they'd,
Hey, they're being laid off by the tens of thousands, then that's all to the good.
amen. Yeah. Well, this is great, Anna. Do you have more?
I think that's enough for people to wrap their heads around. But you know, if they read Exiting the Evil and they read some of the subsequent articles, they'll wrap their heads around the fact that there's a United States corporation and that that's the United States they're talking about, not us. Not the United States, our country, but a United States corporation that is 60% owned by the Pope and 40% owned by the British Crown. That they acquired by illegal and fraudulent means, by the way. So the lack of good faith and the corruption and the secretive, undisclosed nature of all these cozy accommodations that have been made tends to render the entire thing fraudulent, null, and void. And I think that perhaps Mr. Trump has realized, or at least some of the lawyers around him have realized that, hey, the United Nations and the municipal government has no claim on all these Americans who have been fraudulently misrepresented and who have had citizenship obligations for the municipality conferred on them, which is true. It's bogus. A citizenship obligation cannot be applied to someone without their consent, not in this country.
Yeah, and they can't consent as newborn babies, and their mothers can't properly consent without full disclosure.
Right. So the entire thing has been a gigantic con job, a sting, a self-interested constructive fraud, okay? From start A to point Z, it's just nothing but fraud, 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 and crimes related to fraud, extortion, racketeering under color of law, privateering under color of law, inland piracy under color of law. You name it, it is criminal. What they have done here is criminal. And that's why we've offered amnesty to those members of the military that will backwater and do the right thing. Because otherwise they have to hang. And we become responsible for hanging them, or we have to hire someone to do so. And it's all very messy. So, you know, who wants more violence, death, and destruction? I mean, as angry as we get when we think about how we've been abused, misused, and betrayed by our public employees, I think I can speak for 99.9% of Americans that we've been at war for the better part of 200 years through no fault of our own, and we don't really want any more of it. You know, we may be skilled in it. We may have reason for it, but nobody wants any more death and destruction. Sorry, I have to take this.
No problem, Anna. I'll pause the recording while you get that. All right, are you back?
I'm back. I'm sorry, guys, but
No problem.
there's so much going on here. You just can't even imagine what's going on here. It's crazy. We're in Crazyville. There are court suits and there are bank issues and there are diplomatic issues and all sorts of things going on. So, and I'm right in the middle of it, so I have to, you know, I've got one going on this year and one conversation going on in the other.
Well, thank you. We can't begin to imagine how difficult it must be to juggle all of those different tasks and stay on top of everything with the clarity that you have. So you definitely have a gift, and hopefully we can replicate, bring what we need to know to our assemblies and get our pillars stood up and functional and get all the appropriate officials seated and everything, that's really what we need to get done. We know that we need to get that done, but the minutia, I think, sometimes bogs us down. And you're so great about making sure that we have the big picture and what's really wrong and the fraud. And, when we correct our individual status, on a case by case basis, that's one thing. That's what gives us the ability to move forward and assemble and do this job. But it's getting past the mucky muck and being able to do the job and work together cohesively in a way that brings success, like on Ohio,
Well, even Ohio has its problems. They've had trouble understanding the functions of our militia and agreeing to it. I mean, there have always been people in militia circles who look at the historical backdrop and think that we should be forming our militias into standing armies for the states. But that's not the nature of our militia. We're not looking to use a militia to replace a standing professional army. The two are different concepts. Militias are atypical. They are not set up like a military or a mercenary force. They're their own thing. And unfortunately, there's been a considerable amount of misunderstanding about that. There have been a lot of people that think that a militia is an army. But no, that's not what a militia is. And it's certainly not a pirate force or a mercenary force. Different concepts. And so this again is something that we have to relearn and learn to revalue, because our militias can be invaluable and are invaluable. But if you're thinking of them in terms of being an army and dealing with drones and that sort of thing, you have to rethink how to deal with drones and how to deal with the men operating drones. So the militia has to be understood in terms of the tradition of the militia and in terms of public safety and survival. But that's another topic, and I don't want to belabor it. I just want to point out that all of the assemblies have their apparent obstacles and stumbling blocks and things that they have to get through and over. All of them have their share of personality disputes and differing opinions, okay? And what's important is that we bear down and really look at our traditions and look at, the American way, okay? We're not interested in the English way. We're not interested in the German way. About the closest thing we've got in the world to the American militias are the Swiss cantons that have their own civilian forces, public safety forces. And we don't even, we're not even going to follow them that closely. We are going to have things in common with them, but we have our own tradition. We have our own militia. And so just stand by to know that we'll be discussing more about that as we go forward.
Great, thank you, Anna. Now we have a number of hands up. Do you want to go to hands, or was there additional education for us tonight?
Well, let's go to hands, because I'm really losing my voice.
Oh boy. Okay, we've got lots up. Starting with Doug on San Diego. Go ahead, Doug.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, how's Doug?
Oh, hanging in there. Busy, but other than that, I'm good. So what went on in the UN and what went on in The Hague are the same thing, aren't they?
Well, The Hague is a convention. And
Yeah.
the UN is an organization and a corporation. So you have to kind of figure out what you're talking about when you say the UN or the United States.
Yes. So what I mean is is the fact that Trump did not have standing in The Hague.
Oh, he
Is
does
the
have standing in The Hague.
he doesn't have standing to claim our assets.
Right, he does not have standing to claim our assets while acting as the captain of
And-
a British ship.
And so he doesn't have standing to assign us to the UN.
It wasn't us that was assigned, okay? It was the corporation, the United States Corporation and its franchises that were named after us.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
they're over there doing their dirty work and then pretending it has something to do with us, which it doesn't.
So that's something that we run into all the time with
Mhm.
many of the states, especially we're dealing with Michigan now. And the courts just don't recognize our status and standing. I've been wondering if you wrote some great articles about the Council of Inspector Generals and what what was going on in North Carolina, that these people need to be arrested. And I was wondering if you could do something with respect to the state officials and governments and court officials, whatnot, that have been noticed by Americans of who they are and just ignore it.
Well, you've got criminals in charge and they're going to act as criminals. Sometimes they won't, sometimes they will. The most effective way to bring them to heel is to point out their liability. And we do have some interesting work that's been done on liability. And it has had effect. But what really needs to be done here is a systemic blowout of all of this crap. It really needs to be stopped. And it needs to be ended systemically. Because there's really no excuse for them to have municipal courts in the states of the Union anyway. Such courts should not exist, and such municipal law application should not exist. And this is something that I have drummed on the popes and the cardinals and everybody else, so that it should be apparent, and I believe it is apparent, that according to their contracts, they should not be operating anywhere in this country. I mean, the only thing that they should be doing is providing postal service and customs duty at the ports and US patent and weights and measures. Those are the sorts of things that they were supposed to do. But that's all stuff that can be established working right there in Washington, DC, and then blasting out the information to the various locations, the little enclaves, where they are allowed to work. Anyway, we shouldn't have these magistrate courts misaddressing everybody. That should be put to death. That should be put to a stop. And, you know, once this really hits the major newspapers in Europe, everybody's going to know what's happened. It's, you know, it's going to blow up in their faces. And so I just think that it's a matter of time before all of this gets resolved and all of these people get packed up and sent home.
Yeah, we've noticed them of, Chief Justice Marshall in Cohen's versus Virginia. Cohen's versus Virginia said that any judge that takes jurisdiction when he doesn't have it is guilty of treason. So, and we've presented that to these courts, and they just keep right on going.
Because they know that they're not addressing us. They're addressing municipal public trusts. You know, and that's how they get away with this. They know that they're not addressing you. They
Okay,
know
so-
that you're ignorant of what they're doing. And so they're holding this pretend court out here with all these non-existent pretend entities named after you, and they're trying to fool you into thinking that it has something to do with you, so that they can then turn around and basically entrap and ensnare you. This has to come to an end. This is totally unacceptable, and we just need to push it forward and make it clear to our public employees why this is it's not something that can be tolerated. They have to start paying attention. They have to realize what they're doing, and they have to stop. Now, if we were actual citizens of the United States, if we were chattel backing that corporation, if we had agreed to this, if we had ever been stateless, there are lots of arguments they might advance, but they can't. They've got a two-step fraud scheme. And at this point, the municipal fraud has been rolled over, and it's come back to the level of Donald Trump and the territorial United States. But we have to bust both of those public trusts. We can't stop with just one. We have to bust the municipal public trust, we have to bust the territorial public trust, and we have to reinstate our own infant descendant estate property as ours, okay? So there are basically three public trusts. There's the municipal trust, which is a municipal corporation. There's the British Seamen's Trust, which is another public trust organization that has to be busted. And then finally, there's the American Descendant Estate, which they claim we waived when we were just babies in our cradle. And we have to claim that back and put that one out of its misery too. So there are three public trusts that we have to collapse in order to get back our full range of freedom and our full range of property rights and assets. We have to get through three layers of the buggers. And that means getting through the municipal bar, getting through the territorial bar, and getting through the American bar. And, these guys they are so crooked that.
Can we force them to produce the Gruden versus Neal contract where we gave them our consent for any of them?
Oh, absolutely. That's a fair tactic, no matter where you are, is to produce your authority. Produce the contract, produce the obligation, name the source of the obligation. That is it's a good reply to them.
One more question is the court case with Donald Trump in The Hague, is there a site on that, or
No, it's not The Hague, it's the World Court.
the World Court?
No.
Is there a case name or number on that?
They haven't published it yet. It was argued 2 weeks ago, but it's like the U.S. Supreme Court. It can take,
right.
forever to get the published version.
I yield.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, next up is Monica on Minnesota.
Hi, Anna. I'm a part of the vetting committee on Minnesota, and we are in the process of vetting 2 men for the Marshal at Arms role. And it's interesting to me that you just touched on the different trusts and things. And then also in the chat right now, there's some talk going on in the chat about people paying chunks of money to be able to access their trust. And it just so happens that one of these men that we are vetting for Marshal at Arms paid a company called the Mosiah Corporation. He tells us on some questions that we asked him that this company accessed his trust, did some paperwork with the U.S. Treasury for him, took $100 million out of his trust for a bond for investment, naming him as the principal. I don't know if you're familiar with Mosiah, but we're just wondering, is this something that we need to have him paper over, put something on the LRO saying that he doesn't want, anything to do with this Mosiah Corporation anymore? We're trying to make sure that he wouldn't have any open doors in the role of Marshal at Arms, or any insight you can give for this?
Well, it certainly would be a conflict of interest.
Okay. So we wouldn't want him as Marshal at Arms because he did this paperwork before joining the assembly. So he did his 928s and became an assembly member a year after doing this.
Okay, well, there are all these organizations that are rolling around say, access your bonds. Stop a moment and think about the word bond. Think about the word bondage. Those are not your bonds. What they are is gold that was put up by the Pope to basically hire you and gain an interest in your labor. Okay, so when you were born, whatever your birth weight was, the Pope put up an exact amount of weight of gold. You are worth your weight in gold at birth. And so he put a bond on you and on your labor. So he basically was saying, okay, I'm to be repaid this bond from the lifetime labor and earnings of the child. And all the child gets out of it is the ability to operate in commerce. So that means that something that is probably somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 has to be paid by you in order to release the bond that the Pope established at your birth. So they reduced it to a commercial operation, and they reduced you to a municipal public trust corporation, and they foisted off this entire fantasy world like the Land of Oz, and it's not your bond. It's not your bond, okay? It's got nothing to do with you, but they are trying to force you to pay off that bond, right? There's all this craziness, all this has been drummed up with fantasy, with fictions, like fictional narratives, a plot and a story. According to them, first and foremost, our mothers donated us as trusts to be wards of the state. Our mothers were unwed mothers who gave birth on a battlefield, according to them. And our mothers gave us up to the tender mercies of the state of Wisconsin Incorporated, or the state of Idaho Incorporated, or the state of Vermont Incorporated. And thus we became wards of the Queen. And the Queen took all of our land and our assets and our labor and everything else and shared it out with the Pope, 60-40, like always, right? So the Queen creates this sailor's estate, this seaman's estate in the international jurisdiction of the sea, and defines it as an estate belonging to a British merchant mariner, a warrant officer occupied as a taxpayer, required to collect tariffs and taxes for the Queen and remit the money back to the British Treasury. That's who's been sailing around under your name all these years. And he's missing in action. So he's presumed dead. And his estate has been rolled up as a public trust under Admiralty jurisdiction. Okay? Now, based on that, the Pope's boys come along and go, oh, well, they're missing. They whereabouts unknown. Time to set up a Sestake trust and take in all of their assets and maintain these as a public trust under the presumptions of the Sestake Act. And if they come back and claim their stuff, oh, well and good. But note who is supposed to be claiming that stuff. If you come back and claim on the municipal bond and on the municipal estate trust, it's assumed that you're the British seaman. The missing British seaman turned up and claimed back his estate. So what happens? Then all the assets go tumbling back into the estate of the British seaman. And then it's up to you to raise your hand again and say, hey, but I'm not a British seaman and never was. And what the hell do you think you're saying or thinking or doing?
Right.
And then it goes through the Admiralty. Oh, well, gee, guess what? We're not British seamen and never were. We're not taxpayers either. We're not warrant officers in the British Merchant Marine. Thank you very much. Sorry if there was any misunderstanding. No, we're Americans. And oh, by the way, that bogus infant descendant estate that you set up for the American named my name, we want it back. We want it all back. And you're a bunch of no good, rotten, incompetent, dishonest, disloyal, repulsive pieces of you know what. And that's about where it stands. We have to collapse 3 public trusts. We have to collapse the municipal trust, we have to collapse the British Territorial Trust and Admiralty, and we have to collapse the American Descendant Estate that the American Bar Association members set up so that they could rule over us. And we need to get busy and, take our buckets and brooms and, just basically wash out the courts and wash out the justices and the judges and all these pretenders that have been rampaging around here playing like they were God Almighty. Use their own law against them and make it public. Tell everybody you know what's going on here. Give them a copy of Exiting the Evil so that they get a good look at what's going on here.
Amen. I totally agree with what you're saying. For this specific situation, when this man who wants to be the Marshal at Arms did his 928s, did that negate the paperwork that this company did for him? Or no?
No,
No.
that's a commercial arrangement. He made a commercial contract with that company to go seize upon that bond, which they did. They charged him $100 million to do it, which was something he could have dissolved himself. And now they say that all this is going to come back, but where's it going to come back to? It's going to come back to the British Territorial Seaman's estate. So he's just shit out of luck and lost at sea, doesn't have any, and he has no chances of ever getting back his estate, going at it the way that he is, because his own estate is buried under 3 public trust estates, 3 bogus, fraudulently constructed public trust estates. The Infant Descendant Estate of the American, the British Seamen's Trust of the missing taxpayer, a warrant officer who collects taxes for the Queen, and the Municipal Sestake Trust. All 3 of those have to be liquidated. All 3 of them have to be objected to, and we have to bring that message home to our employees in a big way.
Absolutely, we do. And so, Anna, just to clarify, so you're saying that we should not have this man on Minnesota be our Marshal at Arms because of this?
Yeah, until all this gets sorted out, he's put himself in a position where he's got probably $1 billion at risk. And, he just made everything that much more difficult, that much more convoluted for himself.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anna. I yield. Thank you.
I'll bet you dollars to donuts that company liquidated the Sestake Trust for the benefit of the Queen, and they took their own $100 million profit and gave the rest to the Brits.
Wow. Thank you, Monica.
We're going back to the land and soil jurisdiction. Other people may choose to stay in the jurisdiction of the sea. Still others may choose to remain in the jurisdiction of the air. And people will just have to make their decisions based on what's best for them and best for their country. Now, I cannot personally imagine why someone would want to adopt the jurisdiction of the sea and subject themselves to the punishments of the sea jurisdiction. Nor can I rationally imagine why anyone would want to be a slave and be subject to the air jurisdiction as a permanent condition. But there are some people who do. So, the thing that we need to remain and retain here is who we are and what we want. We have free will. We don't have to stay in those foreign jurisdictions. We can come home. So, I'm just standing here saying, hey, guys, you can come home. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be part of that. You're not naturally and natively subject to that. That is a foreign and denigrated political status. Okay? And I've tried to make that clear to everybody, exactly what you lose and what you fail to gain, both. And so, I have no answers as to why anyone would remain a British subject. I have no answer as to why anyone would voluntarily agree to be a municipal citizen.
Well, I think it's
But-
because they don't understand, and I think a lot of it's out of fear. But, we have to move forward. I have one quick piece of news, thanks to, I've talked to you about Costa Rica, and Dolores had volunteered. Well, we finally connected, and last night we had the very first online meeting with a handful of Costa Ricans I managed to gather in total Spanish, where I was the only one that didn't know most of what she was saying, except I knew it all already, except for I could pick up words last night. And if all goes well, we can move forward, because I see that, like you say, it's not just free us. We have to free us all. And if we can get things here, there's a lot of Nicaraguans on this in Costa Rica. Maybe we can keep moving this up and down, get all the Americas free. So it's a
Yes,
start.
well, it's not easy to self-govern, but it's what we all have to do. And, each country has different traditions. Each country has different history, different languages, different cultures, different races. But we all are up against it in terms of learning to self-govern and operating our own land and soil jurisdiction competently. It's a big job, it's a big order. But you have to look at the alternatives. A nanny state that parasitizes you. That isn't something that anyone should rationally stand for. And I'm glad to see that more and more Americans are waking up, more are understanding the stakes, more are getting the criminal nature of what's been done here. And as they do, they begin to study and research and think for themselves again, which is really refreshing and wonderful. And all of us tin hats who have been laughed at and called conspiracy theorists and, sovereign citizens and every other disparaging label they could think of, suddenly turn out to be the guys that were right about chemtrails and about so much else. So I think get ready for another great influx of more people who are going to need to learn and be brought along, not just in foreign countries, but also here at home.
And some of them have relatives there too.
Oh yeah,
You can have a connection from somebody here that's actually Honduras, the family there. So
oh
we
yeah,
just-
America is, we have traditions that span back and connect to every other country on earth.
and spreading the word and getting this going. People here, a lot of people in this country knew something's just not right and not happy. But we have to free us all.
Right. If we allow slavery for one man, we've allowed slavery for all men.
Well, thanks again, and I yield.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, next up, we've got Lee.
Anna, you and I have been in this battle for many years. I remember this week reading your letter, handwritten letter for Donald Trump. It was a very interesting letter. I have been told that he is supposed to be announcing this week that we're returning to the Republic and to the common law. Have you had an answer to your letter?
I have not. They're still trying to, avoid certain facts, like the fact they already stole the Federal Republic in 1871. I think Mr. Trump is trying to kind of go back and cover over that real ugly little incident and then pretend that the British territorial government was the rightful owner. It wasn't. We're the rightful owners. And so I'm sort of at loggerheads with Mr. Trump over this because he's misrepresenting what he's doing. What he's doing is he's seizing back the United States corporation assets from the Pope and, saying, oh, it's going to be under the common law. Well, he could be choosing any one of a dozen different kind of common laws, British common law, military common law, unless he really backs up and says, okay, it's going to be under American common law, it's just another shyster game. It's just more bull with a British territorial president and British territorial U.S. capital C citizens creating a federal republic and trying to do this sleight of hand and convince us that it's our federal republic when it's not. It's their federal republic, just like they created their version of the state and their version of the United States. They're trying to do the same sort of bait and switch kind of crap again. And he thinks that we don't see that and that we won't object to it, but we most certainly do and we will bring it forward into the courts and we will bring it out into the international world and we'll say, what is this? And he better be able to answer. Otherwise, he's just engaged in more criminality and more international intrigue and more bull. Anyway, that's
Well,
what
I've been reading all of these letters that are ready to be submitted to the state of Utah to get us back, and it's marvelous. But I've ended up losing homes and cars and everything because other people believe, and I've got all my adopted children, they're all fighting against me. And I taught them, I've tried, but I've got the 9th of May, the county is claiming they're going to sell my home. And it goes completely against their law because as a veteran, they claim that I don't have to pay property tax. And that's what they're claiming they're going to sell my home for. And so all of these things, it's what people believe they've been taught is truth. So what do we do once these documents are all submitted to the state of Utah that are marvelous documents and even showing the fee schedules and everything? What is that going to do to bring about a change in Utah? So Utah has been out of order since 1974, specifically because of they have been following the Constitution. The Senate quit filing their oath of office in 1974. And then in 1989, there wasn't a state officer had filed their oath of office.
you're
And
dealing with a corporation, Lee. You're not dealing with a state. Okay, it's a corporation. It's a foreign corporation.
I
And
know that it's a foreign corporation, but
And-
how do we get out from under it? They're not involved with it.
Well, take a look at the paperwork that you've been served. It will either be in all capital letters or it will be in upper and lowercase letters, right?
No, I understand all that.
Okay, well, look at the name really carefully. and reply to the court that this isn't me. And if you took my advice, you'll have already recorded your own meets and bounds survey of your land and renamed it and given it a different address and recorded that with the Department of Natural Resources. At which point they have no basis. They can try to think about it this way. They're trying to come at you to collect taxes that this corporation owns. And what can that corporation actually own? The only thing that they actually own that is adjacent to your property is the road easement. So they come along and they declare a address for their road easement. And then they attach your property, your land, your house, your stuff, as if it were part of that road easement, because no separate survey delineating your property as separate from the road easement exists. So that's why you create and record your own separate parcel and name it and record it.
I've submitted to them that I have proposed the deed, the patent on my home, and they're ignoring it, and they say that it isn't real. And I've been going this battle with the county for 20 years, and they're ignoring me on everything I do.
Well, about all you can do at that point is take them to district court and oppose it on the basis of you're not a franchise. They have no proof that you're a franchise. They have no proof of contract with you.
Well, this court, I'm a part of the court in Utah, the legal court. But what is that going to be able to do? They can ignore this just like they've ignored me for all these years.
That's because they've got trustees acting for you. That's because they're still not releasing the trust. They're still not dissolving the trust. You can send the court a demand letter to dissolve the Lee Child Stansbury Trust. It doesn't matter whether it's the British Territorial Upper Lowercase Admiralty Court or if it's the municipal court in all capital letters. And you can also do what I suggest and just draw a line between the public road easement and your property. They can't get past that either, because all that they own is the road easement. They don't own your property.
Well, they made me a corporation 90 years ago. And that doesn't seem to faze them. They just ignore it because they believe they're right.
Well, as far as they're concerned, there's this corporation that they're suing for property taxes. They think the corporation owns this property described as blah, 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 right? Well, that has nothing to do with you or your property. But until you demark and rename your property separate from the road easement, they'll just include it with the road easement.
I've done that.
Yeah.
I filed a patent on my home, and I've got the 160 acres that had a patent that it was developed with. And it says in that patent that it will be for those heirs and those assigns forever, but they don't accept that.
It's a push me, pull you. If you're an heir, then you're not a corporation. If you're a corporation, then you're liable. Okay? They're addressing the corporation. They are addressing a public trust. Okay? Until you can shake them loose from that idea that this is a public trust that they are administering, and do something that is really going to alert them to the fact that you're not buying this and not accepting it, and not adopting that, they will continue to pursue you. Now, I've told you what to do to separate your land from their land. from the corporate holdings and your private holdings. If you don't do that, then you're stuck having to ask them for evidence of their contract with you.
They
as
just
owner
ignored it.
name. And
I
they
yield. I appreciate it, Anna. Thank you.
yeah, well, I've had good luck opposing the different variations of name. I've had good luck opposing their definition of their property according to their description. I've had good luck opposing their presumptions and forcing them to either come up with the contract or stand down. So, you know, I wish I could be there and kind of whisper in your ear and say this. But you know, lacking that and lacking the preparation that I suggested and lacking the understanding of the name issues, if you can pay the property tax at this point, I'd have someone else pay it for you. I'd just give a buddy the money and have him do it.
Well, my children want me to create a mortgage, borrow on my home that's been paid off twice and pay the taxes. So, and these are all adopted children that I've been raising, and they still are brainwashed to believe that I'm wrong and they're all right. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Lee.
May I, 1 second, Lee, at 6:45 in the chat, I put the case law for Cruden versus Neal and US and Twining versus New Jersey and Combs versus Virginia. I yield.
What time was that?
6:45 p.m. Pacific. So it'd probably be year bound. It'll be 7:45. I yield.
Thank you.
You know what? If you could send me that, I would put it out there for everybody in an article and explain, you know, where that can come in handy.
Okay, so I'll wait till after you're gone, and then I can do a little explanation for everybody. We get somebody else in here. I yield.
Okie dokie. I'm gonna have to go, guys. My voice is giving out. You can hear that it's raw. There's nothing hardly left of it.
Well, we totally understand, Anna. Thank you.
Where did she say to send the property tax? Because I'm dealing with property tax.
I didn't write down where she said about the property tax. Did anybody catch the where?
She said Department of Resources.
Department of Natural Resources.
Department.
Oh, I did
of-
write that down. Get your meets and bounds survey, rename the property and send it off to the Department of Natural Resources. You have to create a line between the public road easement and your property.
Okay.
I've got the meets and bounds and everything on mine, and it's certified by a specific expert, but they still ignite it.
So
Ignore it.
Lee, is there a court case on this?
Pardon?
Is there a court case on this?
No, they're just gonna sell my home. There is no court case on it.
They're just gonna
can't
auction,
do
they're gonna
that.
auction it off, is what they're
Yeah.
selling your house?
They will do it too.
It's, they claim I owe $13,000 and it'll sell for less than that. And it's $700,000 home.
Wow, you need to talk to Eugene Pang. He'll help you with that. Michelle, thank you so much. I'm going to check out. Thank you. You're always so amazing. And all of you, good night.
Thank you. Good night. See you next time, Annette.